3 men entered the mountain with 200 sheep. None returned. No bodies were found. Not a single sheep remained. It happened in broad daylight, in a region they had known for decades. No storm, no predators, no conflict. Their last recorded trace was at 11:47 a.m. on March 14, 1962, when they crossed a mountain pass known as El Ventisquero Olvidado in Chilean Patagonia, in the Aysén region. 3 experienced shepherds, 2 working dogs, an entire flock. By 6:20 p.m., and when they failed to return, the search began. They found the pass open. They found hoofprints on the rocky ground. They found silence. Nothing else. In the days that followed, more than 80 people searched 600 square kilometers of steep, wind-scoured terrain. No obvious hiding places, no deep ravines, no raging rivers. They used tracking dogs, helicopters, local guides who knew every trail in the region. 0 human traces, 0 sheep carcasses, 0 footprints beyond the first kilometer. As if they had been erased from the world. What makes this case suffocating is not the lack of clues. It's the physical impossibility of the disappearance. There was nowhere to go. No way to hide 200 animals and 3 adult bodies on an open mountain under a clear sky. And yet, they are no longer here. They didn't die. They didn't run. They weren't taken. They simply ceased to exist between one step and the next. This is not a solved case with a comforting ending. This is a black hole in reality, a moment where the basic laws of physics and logic were torn apart and never stitched back together. What you're about to hear has no answer. It never did. It never will. The ranch known as Estancia La Esperanza was located 230 miles from the city of Coyhaique, deep in the wild lands of Chilean Patagonia. It was a sheep-raising property, steep, rocky, visible for miles in every direction, with snow-capped peaks and distant glaciers on the horizon. There were no dense forests, no deep caves, no fast-moving rivers where someone could drown without leaving a trace. It was the kind of place where you could spot a man from 2 miles away. Manuel Rojas, 52 years old, was the head shepherd. He had worked there since 1948. He knew every trail, every shelter, every shadow of that land. With him were Patricio Soto, 34, and a young apprentice, Diego Vargas, 19. Both had years of experience. Both were used to the cold, the wind, and the harshness of the work. On the morning of March 14, 1962, they set out to move a flock of 200 sheep to a pasture about 5 miles south, crossing the mountain pass known as El Ventisquero Olvidado. Routine, something they did every week. They brought water. They brought a portable radio, which was never used. They brought the dogs, Loba and Trueno. The ranch foreman, Carlos Fuentes, saw them leave at 11:47 a.m. He waved. They waved back. That was the last visual contact. They were expected to return before 4 p.m. At 6:20 p.m., when they hadn't come back, Fuentes saddled his horse and went after them. He found the pass open, as expected. He found fresh hoof prints, as expected. But 0.75 miles into the pass, everything stopped. The tracks simply ended, as if the flock had been lifted off the ground, as if the men had evaporated into the cold air. Fuentes shouted their names until his voice broke. Only the Patagonian wind answered. Now let me ask you something before we continue. What city are you watching this video from? Drop it in the comments. I want to know how far this story is reaching. And while you're at it, like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any case we bring here, because what comes next will leave you shaken. Carlos Fuentes was not a man prone to panic. He had worked in Patagonia for 30 years. He had seen blizzards wipe out entire herds. He had seen men get lost and be found days later, frozen but alive. He had seen accidents. He had seen death. But he had never seen this. He rode slowly along the trail, following the hoof prints cutting through the rocky ground. The sun was still high. Visibility was perfect. He could see for miles ahead, Open slopes, low shrubs, nothing else. And then, exactly 0.75 miles from the entrance to the pass, the track stopped. They didn't thin out. They didn't scatter. They didn't turn to either side. They simply ended. As if someone had drawn an invisible line on the ground and said, "That's far enough." Fuentes dismounted, walked in circles, looked for human footprints, signs of struggle, blood, torn wool, anything, nothing. The ground beyond that point was untouched. He shouted, "Rojas, Soto, Vargas." His voice echoed and died. Absolute silence. No bleating sheep, no barking dogs, no human sound. Fuentes galloped back to the ranch, gathered 7 men. They returned with lanterns, ropes, rifles. They didn't know why, but they brought them. They reached the cutoff point at 9:15 p.m. Under the lantern light, the scene became even more grotesque. The tracks were clear, deep, recent. Marks from 200 pairs of hooves, boot prints, dog paw prints, and then nothing, as if the world itself had been cut. One of the men, Pedro Guzman, a former Navy serviceman, said something no one ever forgot. "This isn't desertion. This isn't escape. This is removal." They searched the area within a 1,600-foot radius. Nothing. They camped there, waited for dawn. When the sun rose, they hoped the light would reveal something. A detour, a hidden trail, a mistake caused by darkness. But daylight only confirmed the impossible. There was no detour. There was no trail. There was no mistake. 3 men, 2 dogs, and 200 sheep had entered that space and vanished. On March 16th, the Coyhaique police were notified. Sergeant Ricardo Vidal arrived with 6 officers and 2 local trackers, men capable of following days-old trails across rocky terrain. They began at the entrance to the pass. They confirmed it. Clear tracks for 0.75 miles. Then, nothing. The trackers, known as Antu and Puelche, stayed silent for long minutes, crouched low, touching the ground. Puelche finally spoke, in Spanish with a regional accent. "The earth doesn't lie. But here, the earth stopped talking." Antu agreed. He said it was as if something had eaten the footsteps. Vidal didn't believe in mysticism. He ordered a grid search. The area was divided into 330 by 330-foot squares. Every inch would be checked. They spent 3 days doing exactly that. They found an old piece of barbed wire, unrelated, the bones of a guanaco, months old, 3 empty glass bottles, discarded, no fingerprints, no human trace, no recent animal trace, no evidence of violence. Vidal sent a preliminary report on March 19th. There is no logical scenario that explains the simultaneous disappearance of 3 adults and an entire herd in open mountainous terrain under normal weather conditions. There are no signs of struggle, escape, or forced movement. Searches will continue. But he knew. They all knew. This was no longer a search for survivors. It was a search for meaning. One detail had been eating at Fuentes since the first day. Manuel Rojas had brought a portable radio, standard equipment for long herding routes. If something went wrong, he would have called. Sudden snowstorm? He would have called. Injured sheep? He would have called. Accident? He would have called. But the radio was never used. Fuentes checked the base station logs. No transmissions between 11:47 a.m. and 6:20 p.m. That meant one of 2 things. Nothing went wrong, until something happened so fast there was no time to react, or something prevented Rojas from using the radio before he even realized he needed to. Both possibilities were terrifying. If it was too fast to react, what could it have been? If it was too silent to notice, what could it have been? Fuentes spent sleepless nights trying to construct a logical scenario. Scenario 1. Animal attack impossible. There were no predators large enough in the region, and even if there were, 200 sheep do not disappear without blood, wool, or bones. Scenario 2. Kidnapping. By whom? How? There were no nearby roads. No vehicles capable of transporting 200 animals without leaving tire marks. And why take the dogs too? Scenario 3. Landslide or ground collapse. A geological team from the University of Chile was called in. They conducted surveys. Used ground-penetrating radar. Nothing. No cavities, no fissures, no cracks. The ground was solid, compact, intact. Scenario 4. Voluntary disappearance. Rojas had a wife and 2 children. Soto was engaged. Vargas lived with his widowed mother. None had debts. None had known enemies. None had expressed any desire to vanish. And even if they had, how do you run away with 200 sheep? Fuentes crossed out every scenario. Only the unacceptable remained. There was no explanation. On March 23rd, the official search was suspended. Not because they gave up, but because there was nowhere left to look. Vidal made one last attempt. He brought in tracking dogs from Santiago, animals trained to locate buried, drowned, or decomposed bodies. They released the dogs at the cutoff point. They sniffed, circled, whined, then refused to move forward. They sat down, cried, pulled their leashes in the opposite direction. The handler, a man named Javier Peña, said something that froze everyone's blood. They're not confused. They're afraid. Peña had worked with search dogs for 18 years. He had never seen that behavior. The dogs were detecting something. But it wasn't the scent of death. It wasn't the scent of human fear. It was something before that. Something that made them retreat on instinct. Vidal ordered the dogs released. They ran straight back to the vehicles and would not come out again. When the search was officially closed on March 30th, 1962, the final report was 11 pages long and contained no conclusion, only facts. 3 men entered an open area. They brought 200 sheep and 2 dogs. They disappeared without leaving a trace beyond 0.75 miles from the starting point. No bodies were found. No animals were found. No evidence of violence, escape, or natural phenomenon was detected. The final line of the report read, "This case remains open due to the absence of factual closure. There is no sustainable hypothesis." Translated, we don't know what happened, and we may never know. But there was something the report did not mention. Something only the local residents knew. Something Fuentes discovered 3 weeks later. And that would change everything. Because this was not the first disappearance at Estancia La Esperanza. It was the third. Carlos Fuentes discovered it by accident. He was in the ranch archive looking through old livestock movement records, trying to compare routes, searching for some pattern that might have been overlooked. That's when he found a dusty wooden box in the corner of the storage room. Inside were accounting ledgers from 1923 to 1955, and on a page dated October 1937, handwritten in faded ink, Patricio Millan, an assistant, did not return from the southern sector. Search conducted for 4 days. No signs found. Herd 87 head also disappeared. Case reported to Coy Hike police. No resolution. Fuentes felt his stomach drop. He kept flipping pages. March 1949. Javier Corrales went out alone to inspect the southern fence. Took horse and dog. Expected return. 2 p.m. Did not return. Search, 6 days. Nothing found. Horse, dog, man, all missing. Police archived as unspecified fatality. Fuentes closed the ledger, took a deep breath, picked it up again, checked the dates. 1937, southern sector. 1949, southern fence. 1962, El Ventisquero Olvidado Pass, southern sector. All in the same region. All without bodies, all without explanation. Fuentes went to find the landowner, Don Eduardo Guzman, a 71-year-old man who had inherited the ranch from his father. "You knew about this?" Fuentes asked, throwing the ledgers onto the desk. Don Eduardo looked at them, sighed, nodded. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because it doesn't change anything," Don Eduardo replied, tired. "Do you think I didn't try to understand? My father tried. My grandfather tried. There is no answer, Fuentes. There never was. How many in total?" Don Eduardo closed his eyes. 7 men, 3 horses, 4 dogs, 312 sheep. Over how many years? Since 1891. Fuentes felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Don Eduardo took Fuentes into the main house. In the office, locked inside a steel drawer, was a sealed envelope. Inside, copies of police reports, letters, newspaper clippings, personal notes, all related to the disappearances. Don Eduardo spread the documents across the desk. My grandfather started documenting everything after the second case. He believed that if he gathered enough information, he'd find a pattern. And did he? Only one. They all vanished in the southern sector, all between March and October, all on clear sky days. Fuentes picked up the first document, a yellowed, brittle newspaper clipping from 1891. Shepherd disappears at Estancia La Esperanza. Searches fail. The article was brief. Shepherd Roberto Tenorio, 41, disappeared on October 7th while moving a herd on the Estancia La Esperanza property. Despite extensive searches by local residents and territorial police, no trace was found. Authorities suspect animal attack, though no evidence supports the theory. Fuentes moved to the next one. 1903. 2 rural workers vanish without a trace. Enrique Robles, 29, and Samuel Brito, 34, disappeared on March 14th during routine work at Estancia La Esperanza. Searches conducted for a week produced no results. Families demand deeper investigation, but police state there are no indications of crime. All the same, all identical in pattern. Southern sector, stable weather, total disappearance. No bodies, no tracks beyond a certain point. Extensive searches with no result. Cases archived as unsolved. Why did the police never connect the cases? Fuentes asked. Because they didn't want to, Don Eduardo replied. Or because they couldn't accept what it would imply. And what would that be? Don Eduardo looked out the window, toward the mountains stretching south. That there is something wrong with that land. Fuentes asked for a detailed map of the property. Don Eduardo unrolled a 1948 survey on the desk. Show me where each one disappeared. Don Eduardo took a red pencil, marked 7 points. Fuentes watched. All the points formed an irregular arc, but all within an area of roughly 3.5 square miles. Has anyone ever mapped this region geologically? 3 times, Don Eduardo answered. 1938, 1950, and after Rojas's case in 1962. Nothing abnormal. Common soil, no tectonic faults, no caves, no magnetic anomalies. And radiation? They tested in 1963. Nothing. Fuentes traced the marked points with his finger. Has anyone gone into that area after 1962? Don Eduardo hesitated. Yes. And? Nothing happened. People go in and out all the time. We still move herds through there today. Then why does it keep happening? I don't know, Don Eduardo admitted. But there's something my grandfather wrote down, something he noticed. He opened an old notebook with a worn leather cover, flipping to a marked page. He read aloud. The disappearances do not happen all the time, only on certain days. As if there is a window, a temporary opening, and when it opens, whoever is there is taken. Fuentes felt a chill. Taken where? He didn't know, but he tried to find out. Posso proseguir para o próximo? Pod the 1952 experiment. Don Eduardo told Fuentes something he had never shared with the police. In 1952, 3 years after Javier Corrales vanished, Don Eduardo's grandfather, a man named Donato Guzman, decided to test a theory. He believed the disappearances were tied to specific dates. He analyzed every case, discovered that all of them occurred either between March 7 and March 18th, or between October 12th and October 23. Always within those windows, never outside them. So on October 14th, 1952, Donato did something insane. He entered the southern sector alone. He tied a 1,600-foot rope around his waist. The other end was secured to a sturdy tree with 4 men holding it. The idea was simple. If something tried to take him, the men would pull him back. Donato walked slowly, meter by meter, into the zone where the others had disappeared. 300 feet, 600 feet, 900 feet. Nothing happened. He reached the exact spot where Corrales' tracks had stopped in 1949. He paused there, looked around, then shouted back to the men, "Everything's normal, I don't feel anything." And then the rope went taut, not because Donato pulled, but because something pulled Donato. The 4 men felt the rope ripped from their hands with brutal force, as if a truck had accelerated on the other end. They fell. The rope burned their palms. One of them broke 2 fingers trying to hold on. The rope slid around the tree, screeching, smoking from friction. And then it stopped. Silence. The men scrambled to their feet, terrified. They began pulling the rope back. It came easily. Too easily. When the end reached them, they saw it. The rope had been cut. Not frayed. Not snapped. Cut, as if by a sharp blade, in a straight, clean, precise line, and Donato Guzman was never seen again. 12 years later, it was like a broken clock that somehow still told the correct time twice a day. March 16th, 1974. Clear skies, mild temperature, a light wind coming from the east. 2 workers set out to repair a fence in the southern sector of Estancia La Esperanza. Their names were Marco Tapia, 28, and Ivan Bustamante, 31. They brought tools, wire, wooden posts. They brought water. They brought a portable radio. They were supposed to return before 3 p.m. At 5:30 p.m. When they hadn't come back, the new foreman, a man named Vicente Salas, who had taken over the position in 1968, saddled a horse and went looking for them. He knew the story. Everyone who worked at Estancia La Esperanza knew it. But 12 years had passed without incident. Most people believed it had been coincidence, bad luck, maybe even exaggeration. Salas didn't believe that. He rode straight toward the southern sector, his heart pounding harder with every meter. When he reached the spot, that spot, he saw tools on the ground, wire unspooled, wooden posts scattered, a portable radio turned on, hissing with static. No men. Salas dismounted, shouted their names. Silence. He checked the radio. It was tuned to the correct frequency, battery full, but no message had ever been sent. He looked at the ground. The boot prints of Tapia and Bustamante were clear in the dry soil, walking toward the fence, working, moving normally, and then exactly 0. 8 miles from the entrance to the pass, the footprints stopped. Not gradually, not smeared. They stopped, as if the 2 men had been lifted off the ground mid-step. Salas felt bile rise in his throat. He knew the reports. He had read everything. He knew this had happened before. But reading is different from seeing. Seeing is different from feeling. And in that moment, Vicente Salas felt something he would never forget. The sensation of being watched, not by human eyes, by something older. Something that didn't blink. Paso proseguir para o próximo. POD, the 1974 search. This time, the response was immediate. The Coyhaique police sent 12 officers. They brought helicopters, tracking dogs, state-of-the-art communication equipment. They even brought in a geologist from the University of Chile, Dr. Alejandro Paredes, a specialist in soil phenomena and land subsidence. Paredes spent 3 days analyzing the area. He conducted ground probes, measured soil density, checked mineral composition. His report was devastating. There is no detectable geological anomaly. The ground is stable, compact, and homogeneous. There are no underground cavities, faults, or structures capable of swallowing human beings. Geologically speaking, this area is one of the most boring I have ever studied. Boring. That was the word he used. But the dogs didn't find it boring. Just like in 1962, the tracking dogs refused to move beyond the cutoff point. They barked, whined, pulled backward on their leashes. One of the dogs, a German shepherd named Rex, a veteran of 47 successful searches, urinated himself in fear and had to be carried back to the vehicle. The handler, a man named Gerardo Montes, said something that was recorded in the official report. This dog has found bodies in advanced decomposition. He has found drowning victims after 11 days underwater. In 6 years of work, I've never seen him afraid. But here he senses something I can't name. The search lasted 9 days. They covered 14 square miles. They found a rusted belt buckle, unrelated to the missing men, fragments of old wood, possibly from an abandoned fence, the bones of a puma, natural death months earlier, no trace of Marco Tapia, no trace of Ivan Bustamante, no evidence of struggle, escape, or accident. On March 25, 1974, the search was officially suspended. The case was archived as inexplicable disappearance, no sustainable hypothesis. The same words used in 1962, the same words used in 1949, the same words used in 1937. As if someone had been copy-pasting the same report across decades, because it was the same case. It always had been. Posso proseguir para o próximo? Pode, 3 weeks later. 3 weeks after the case was archived, something unusual happened. Don Eduardo Guzman, now 83 years old, physically fragile but mentally sharp, called a private meeting. Present were Vicente Salas, the foreman; Ricardo Vidal, the former sergeant, retired but still alive; Dr. Alejandro Paredes, the geologist; Carlos Fuentes, retired but still haunted; Alberto Cruz, the only survivor of the 1952 experiment. Don Eduardo locked the office door. He laid all the documents on the table, the same ones he had shown Fuentes in 1962, now updated to include the 1974 case. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice trembling but firm, "we need to stop pretending this is normal." No one replied. 9 men have disappeared on this property since 1891, all in the same sector, all without leaving a trace, all under identical conditions. This is not coincidence. This is not bad luck. This is a pattern. Paredes crossed his arms. "Mr. Guzman, with all due respect, patterns imply cause, and there is no detectable cause." "Then maybe we're looking in the wrong place," Don Eduardo shot back. "Where else would we look?" Don Eduardo turned to Alberto Cruz. "Tell them." Cruz, now 64, white-haired, hands shaking, closed his eyes. "I haven't spoken about that day in 22 years. "I know," Don Eduardo said, "but they need to hear it." Cruz took a deep breath, and then he told them, "When we pulled the rope that day, in 1952, it wasn't a normal pull. It was like something grabbed Donato from the other side. Not pulled, grabbed. Like hands. Many hands." "Did you see anything?" Paredes asked. "No, but I felt it. We all did. The rope wasn't just being pulled. It was being sucked, like there was a vacuum on the other side." "Vacuum doesn't cut rope," Paredes objected. "I know," Cruz said, opening his eyes. "But that thing cut it, and when the end came back, it was hot, not burned from friction, hot, like it had passed through fire." Fuentes leaned forward. "You never mentioned that." "Because no one would have believed me." "I believe you," Fuentes said. Cruz looked at him. "Then you're crazy." "Maybe, but I'm alive. And Donato isn't. And Rojas isn't, and Tapia and Bustamante aren't. So maybe the madness is ignoring the obvious." "And what would that be?" Paredes challenged. Fuentes stood up, walked to the window, looked south. "That there is something in that land, something that opens from time to time, and when it opens, it takes whatever is nearby." "Opens what?" Paredes pressed. "A door? A portal? That's science fiction." "No," Vidal said, speaking for the first time. "It's a factual record. 9 disappearances. 0 bodies, 0 evidence, 0 logic. If this were fiction, it would be too bad to publish. But it happened. It's happening. And it will happen again." Heavy silence filled the room. Don Eduardo broke it. "That's why I called you here. We need to decide. Are we going to keep pretending this is acceptable, or are we going to try to understand? Posso proseguir para o próximo?" And the vigil. It was Salas who made the suggestion. "What if we go back there? During the window, March or October. But this time, prepared." "Prepared how?" Paredes asked. "Cameras, sensors, recording equipment. We stay outside the disappearance zone but monitor what's inside. And if something shows up on the recordings, then we'll have proof. And if nothing shows up, then we'll know it's something cameras can't capture." Paredes shook his head. "This is madness." "Madness is losing 9 men and doing nothing," Salas shot back. Don Eduardo slammed his hand on the table. "Vote." "Who's in favor of trying?" Salas raised his hand. Fuentes raised his hand. Vidal raised his hand. Cruz hesitated, then raised his hand. Paredes stayed still. Then, slowly, raised his hand as well. "May God forgive us," he murmured. In the weeks that followed, they put together a plan. They borrowed equipment from the university. 4 16mm film cameras with tripods, 6 audio recorders, motion sensors, precision thermometers, magnetic field meters, a Geiger counter. They chose the date, October 14, 1974, inside the historical disappearance window. They would set up the equipment in a 165-foot perimeter around the cutoff point. No one would enter the zone. They would only observe, record, wait. On the night of October 13th, Fuentes couldn't sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about Donato Guzman being dragged by the rope, thinking about Rojas, Soto, and Vargas vanishing with 200 sheep, thinking about Tapia and Bustamante leaving their tools in the middle of the job, and thinking about the question that terrified him most. What did they see in the final second? What appears when reality tears? What shape does the void take when it comes for you? Fuentes closed his eyes. Tomorrow he might find out. Or he might become the 10th victim. Either way, the silence was about to be broken. October 14th, 1974. 5:47 a.m. 5 men carried equipment into the southern sector of Estancia La Esperanza. No one spoke during the walk. The sun had not fully risen. The light was gray, cold, uncertain. Salas led the way. Behind him, Fuentes, Vidal, Paredes, and Cruz. Don Eduardo stayed at the ranch, one too old for the hike but awake, waiting. They reached the cutoff point at 6:23 a.m. Paredes was the first to speak. "Here," he pointed to the ground. The 1974 footprints were still visible. Tapia's and Bustamante's boot prints frozen in time, ending abruptly. Salas dropped his backpack. "We set the perimeter, 165 feet from the center. No one crosses the line." They worked in silence. 4 cameras were mounted on tripods, forming a square around the zone. Each pointed toward the center. Audio recorders were partially buried in the soil, microphones facing upward. Motion sensors were fixed to wooden stakes. Thermometers, magnetic meters, and the Geiger counter were laid out in a straight line, 10 feet apart. By 7:41 a.m., everything was ready. Salas checked the cameras, all running. Paredes checked the sensors, all active. Vidal checked the recorders, all recording. Fuentes stood still, staring at the center of the zone. There was nothing there, just rocky ground, low shrubs, scattered stones. Nothing that suggested danger, nothing that explained 9 disappearances. But he felt it. They all did. Something was wrong with that space. It wasn't visible, it wasn't audible, but it was there. Like an invisible presence. A weight in the air, a subtle distortion in the light. Cruz lit a cigarette with trembling hands. "How long do we stay?" "Until sunset," Salas said. "If nothing happens by then, we pack up and leave." "And if something does happen?" Salas didn't answer, because none of them knew what to do if something actually happened. "Posso prosseguir para o próximo?" Poggi. The first hours 7:50 a.m. Nothing. 8:30 a.m. Nothing. 9:15 a.m. Paredes checked the meters. Normal temperature. Normal magnetic field. Normal radiation. 10:00 a.m. Apudu crossed the zone. Everyone froze. The animal entered from the east side, hopped over a rock, sniffed the air, and exited to the west. Unharmed. Normal. Fuentes let out the breath he'd been holding. Maybe it only works on humans, Cruz murmured. Or maybe today isn't the day, Paredes replied. 10:45 a.m. Vidal opened a thermos. Hot coffee. He offered it to the others. No one felt hungry, but they all drank. They needed something to do with their hands. 11:30 a.m. The wind stopped. It was subtle. No one noticed immediately, but Fuentes did. The air was still, completely still. No breeze, no movement in the shrubs, as if the world had held its breath. "Do you feel that?" he asked. The others looked around. Salas frowned. The wind stopped. It didn't just stop, Fuentes corrected. It died. Paredes checked the meters again. Temperature, normal. Atmospheric pressure, normal. But something was different. He couldn't name it. It was as if the sound had changed. Not quieter, muffled, like they were inside a padded room. 12:00 p.m. Noon. The sun was directly overhead. Short shadows, harsh light. And then Cruz said, "There's something wrong with the shadow." Everyone looked at him. "What shadow?" Cruz pointed to the center of the zone. There. There was a stone in the middle of the area, about the size of a human skull. Gray. Ordinary. Its shadow should have been directly beneath it. Small. Compact. But it wasn't. The shadow was stretched, pulled toward the south, as if the sun were in a different position. Paredes took out a compass, checked the sun's direction. That doesn't make sense. The shadow is pointing where it shouldn't. "Maybe the stone is tilted," Salas suggested. "It's not," Fuentes said. "I saw that stone when we arrived. It was level." Paredes raised binoculars, focused on the stone. "It's still level." Silence. "Then why is the shadow wrong?" Vidal asked. No one answered, because there was no answer. "Posso prosseguir para o próximo?" Pode 12:34 p.m. The first anomaly. The motion sensor went off. A sharp, repetitive beep. Everyone turned. The sensor was on the northern side of the perimeter, pointed toward the center. "Something moved," Paredes said, checking the device. "What?" Salas asked. "I don't know, but the sensor detected movement." They stared at the zone. Nothing. No animal. No wind. No explanation. "Maybe it malfunctioned," Cruz suggested. Paredes shook his head. "I tested it this morning. It was working perfectly." The beeping continued for 11 seconds, then stopped. Fuentes felt his stomach tighten. "Log the time. 12:34, he said. Salas wrote it down. Vidal checked the audio recorders. Did they capture anything? He rewound the tape, put on the headphones, listened, his face drained of color. "What is it?" Fuentes asked. Vidal took off the headphones and handed them to him. "Listen for yourself." Fuentes put them on, pressed play. He heard static, wind, even though there was no wind. And then, faint, barely audible, a whisper. It wasn't words. It wasn't a human voice. It was something in between, as if something were trying to speak but had forgotten how. Fuentes tore off the headphones. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," Vidal said, "but it's on the recording." Paredes took the headphones, listened. His face went pale too. "That's not interference," he said quietly. "That's organic." "Organic how?" Salas demanded. "Like something alive." "Posso prosseguir para o próximo?" Pide 1:12 p.m. The temperature drops. Paredes was watching the thermometers when he noticed it. The temperature dropped 7 degrees in 3 minutes. "Clouds?" Salas asked. Paredes looked up. Clear sky, bright sun. "There are no clouds." "Then why is it getting colder?" It's not getting colder here, Paredes corrected. It's getting colder there. He pointed to the center of the zone. The thermometers closest to the cutoff point read 56 degrees off. The thermometers at the outer perimeter read 82 degrees off. That's impossible, Vidal whispered. I know, Paredes said, but it's happening. Fuentes raised the binoculars, focused on the center, and he saw it. Condensation, vapor forming in the air, like breath on a cold day. But there was no one there. There's vapor, he said, his voice cracking. In the center, like something is breathing. Where? Salas asked. In the middle, like lungs. They all raised binoculars. They all saw it. A thin mist, barely visible, forming and dissipating in the air. Rhythmic. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, like respiration. Cruz dropped his cigarette. We need to leave. Not yet, Salas said, but his voice was shaking. We need to leave now, Cruz said louder. The cameras are running, Paredes argued. If we leave now, we lose everything. I'd rather lose everything than become number 10, Cruz snapped. Fuentes wasn't listening. He was staring at the center, at the mist, at the rhythm. And then he noticed something. It's speeding up. What? Vidal asked. The breathing. It's getting faster. They looked again. Fuentes was right. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Faster. More forceful. Like something was waking up. Posso prosseguir para o próximo? Pode 1:41 p.m. The light changes. The sunlight turned yellow. Not gradually. Instantly. As if someone had placed a filter over the world. Paredes looked up at the sky. That's not possible. The sun was in the same position, but the light was different. Thicker. Denser. Like honey poured into the air. And then Fuentes saw it. At the center of the zone, where the mist was forming, something was taking shape. It wasn't solid. It wasn't transparent. It was something in between. Like a smudge in reality itself. A blur his eyes refused to focus on. Do you see that? He whispered. They all did. A form. Vertical. Roughly the size of a man. But wrong. The proportions were wrong. The angles were wrong. It was like looking at something through warped glass. Salas grabbed the handheld camera and began taking photos. Click, click, click. The form moved. It didn't walk. It didn't glide. It appeared 3 yards to the left, then appeared 2 yards to the right, like skipped frames in a damaged film reel. Vidal began praying under his breath. Cruz was crying. Paredes was writing frantically, hands shaking. And Fuentes was listening, because now there was sound. Not coming from the form, coming from inside his head. A voice, or many voices, overlapping, saying something he couldn't understand, but recognized, like a forgotten language, like a name you only hear in dreams. And then the form turned toward him. It had no eyes, no face, but it looked at him. And Fuentes felt it. He wasn't just being observed. He was being known. Every thought, every fear, every secret, exposed, violated, consumed. He collapsed to his knees, screamed, and the form vanished. Posso prosseguir pro próximo? Pode 2:03 p.m. Silence. The light returned to normal. The temperature rose. The wind came back. Everything was as it had been before. Except Fuentes. He was on the ground, curled inward, shaking uncontrollably. Salas rushed to him. Fuentes, are you okay? Fuentes didn't answer. He was staring at nothing, eyes wide, mouth open. Vidal checked his pulse. He's alive, but he's in shock. Paredes ran to the equipment, checked the cameras, checked the audio recorders, checked the sensors. Then he froze. No, that can't be. What? Salas asked. Paredes turned around, his face white as paper. The cameras recorded everything. The sensors logged everything. The recorders were running the entire time. And, Salas pressed, and there's nothing on the recordings. Paredes was panicking. He rewound the tape from camera 1. Pressed play. The image appeared on the small viewfinder screen. The mountains, the shrubs, the stone at the center. He fast-forwarded. 12:34 p.m. The moment the motion sensor first went off. Nothing. 1:12 p.m. The temperature drop, the mist, nothing. The image was clean, sharp, with no vapor, no change in light. 1:41 p.m. The yellow light, the form, nothing. The sun shone normally. The stone sat unmoving.
That's impossible,
Paredes shouted, his voice breaking. I saw it. We all saw it. Salas ran to camera 2. Rewind, play, the same. Camera 3, camera 4. All 4 cameras, positioned at different angles, with different lenses, on different film reels, showed the exact same thing. Nothing happened. The center of the zone remained empty and unchanged the entire time. Vidal grabbed one of the audio recorders, put on the headphones. He heard wind noise, no whisper, no voices, no anomaly. Just the mountain silence. The sensors, Salas murmured. The motion sensors. Paredes rushed to the data logs. They triggered. It's all here. Temperature changes, magnetic fluctuations, everything registered. But the cameras caught nothing? Vidal asked, incredulous. Nothing, Paredes shouted, slamming his hand on the equipment. It's as if whatever happened cannot be recorded. Fuentes, still on the ground, began to tremble harder. His eyes were fixed on the point where the form had looked at him. He tried to speak. No words came out. Only a guttural sound, a raw noise of terror. Cruz knelt beside him. What did you see, Fuentes? What did you hear? Fuentes shook his head. He couldn't explain. He couldn't even remember clearly. It was as if the memory itself had been ripped out, leaving behind only the scar of fear. The unsustainable truth. They dismantled the equipment in silence. The walk back to the ranch was heavier than the walk in. Don Eduardo was waiting on the porch. So? He asked, his voice tight with expectation. Salas looked at Fuentes, still dazed. It happened. What happened? Everything. The temperature drop, the light change, a form appeared. Don Eduardo closed his eyes. And the recordings? Paredes handed him the film reels. They show nothing, Mr. Guzman. Absolutely nothing. Don Eduardo opened his eyes and looked at the reels. Then, the void recorded the void. No one answered, because it was the only possible truth. Whatever was there was not something human technology could capture. It did not obey known physical laws. It existed on a different layer of reality, and from time to time it manifested. It took, and then it withdrew, carrying with it not just bodies, but evidence, leaving behind only silence and madness. The case of the 3 shepherds in 1962, and now the disappearance of Tapia and Bustamante in 1974, were never resolved. The police reports remained unchanged. Inexplicable disappearance, no sustainable hypothesis. The story of the 1974 vigil was never made public. The 5 men made a pact of silence. Who would believe them? Who would believe that cameras failed to record what stands directly in front of them? Who would believe that an invisible form can steal a man's memory? Fuentes never fully recovered. He lived another 15 years, but he was never the same. He spent hours staring into nothing, whispering incomprehensible words. His children said he talked about the voice and the gaze, but he never explained what they meant. He died in 1989, taking with him the secret of what he saw. Alberto Cruz, the survivor of 1952, died in 1978. He never spoke about the matter again after that meeting. Vicente Salas sold Estancia La Esperanza in 1980. He could no longer live with the constant fear. The property was purchased by a corporation that converted it into cattle ranch land. and the southern sector was fenced off and declared an environmental preservation area, an excuse to keep it empty. But the void was never truly empty. The story of Estancia La Esperanza did not end in 1974. The disappearances continued. Not as frequently, but they continued. 1987, a German tourist, Hans Richter, wandered into the preservation area and vanished. His backpack and camera were found. The camera was empty. 1999, a group of biology students conducting field research in the region lost one of their members, Sarah Jimenez. Her colleagues said she was right there, and then she wasn't. 2013, a mapping drone worth thousands of dollars flew over the southern sector. Satellite footage showed the drone entering the area. The next frames showed only static. The drone was never recovered. The land is still there. The southern sector is still there. And the void is still there. Waiting. There is no answer. There is no explanation. There is no closure. Only the brutal certainty that something violated reality in that stretch of land. Something that imposes absence. Something that collapses existence, and that from time to time manifests, not to kill, not to destroy, but to take. Where to? No one knows. And maybe it's better that way. Because whatever exists on the other side of that invisible line, on the other side of that eyeless gaze, is something the human mind was never meant to understand. It is something that should not exist. But it does. And it continues to exist. A black hole in the fabric of the world. A silent reminder that there are things we cannot see, cannot touch, cannot explain, but that can erase us, without a trace, without an answer. Only silence, and the certainty that somewhere, the void is still breathing and waiting.